Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni Viewer, and today I'm going to share my quick thoughts on a recent concept album which was released. I'm not going into too much detail, just sharing my initial thoughts. Consider this a bit of a precursor to what my eventual concept album review series will be. Our subject today, The Source by Ayreon. For the uninitiated, Ayreon is one of the many musical projects overseen by Arjen Anthony Lucassen. Born and raised in the Netherlands, Lucassen has a great talent for composing music and a knack for storytelling. He also happens to be a huge nerd with a love of all things sci-fi. Ayreon is his most successful project, in which he creates a sprawling, bizarre, and yet fascinating rock opera shared universe spread across multiple albums. In other words, he's my kind of guy. The Source is the latest chapter in the Ayreon Saga, and I am pleased to say it does not disappoint. Like all but the first two Ayreon albums, The Source is a double album. Despite being tied into the larger story, it also functions as a standalone album. It is set several billion years in the past, where the ancient ancestors of the human race live on a planet called Alpha. The recent decision by Alpha's president to allow all technological systems to be controlled by the Frame has recently backfired. The Frame has gained sentience, decided it doesn't like humans, and is leading a robot uprising to wipe everyone out. Humanity's only hope for survival is to leave Alpha in an advanced spaceship called the Starblade and find a new world to settle on. And if any of that sounds reminiscent of Battlestar Galactica, specifically the new Battlestar Galactica, you wouldn't technically be wrong. There are some similarities. And even though Arjen himself has never mentioned it being an influence, I'd be kind of surprised if it weren't. But don't go thinking this is just Battlestar Galactica the rock opera. Trust me, there's a lot to set it apart. I just don't want to spoil anything. I especially don't want to spoil how it ties into everything else. As with most Ayreon albums, there are multiple singers cast as the different characters throughout the album, each one easy to distinguish. There are also a number of guest musicians to include strings and winds and whatnot, but the driving force of the music are the instruments played by Arjen himself and his longtime drummer Ed Warby. Everyone involved in this album is on fire and it sounds great. The story itself also feels interestingly timed. The large cast of characters covers a wide variety of types, providing us with a wide variety of perspectives. Political, cynical, optimistic, religious, scientific, you name it. And some of the lyrics kind of feel familiar if you're keeping up with current events. However, this is not a political album. It's not specifically telling you what to think. There's a lot that's open to interpretation. You are ultimately left to draw your own conclusions, even if you know how the rest of the Ayreon story plays out. Also worth noting is the artwork within the album by Jan Sotre, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, which is also really cool to look at. According to interviews, the art actually inspired Arjen's music quite heavily this time around. And again, if you're familiar with the other albums, you may recognize a couple things. So like I said, I didn't want to get into too much detail just yet, but the long and the short of it is this. The Source is another great entry in the Ayreon Saga. If you're already an Ayreon fan, you no doubt have already picked it up. If you're not familiar with Ayreon yet, I'd still suggest listening to it. I will eventually be revisiting it once my concept album review series gets underway. In the meantime, I've provided links to Arjen Anthony Lucassen's official YouTube channel so you can hear the tracks for yourself and decide whether or not you think this is worth getting. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer, signing off.